Welcome back to Why Blank Lost for Big Brother 26, or as we call it this time, Why Blank Won. And the other three lost. I'm David Bloomberg, and I'm here with my co-host, Ovi Kabir, for our look at the Final Four, and especially Chelsie, who deserves huge congratulations for her win.
Thank you, David. We have made it here. We have marathoned our way here from our viewers, our listeners. We have finally completed the season. We have a winner, few losers. And like many of us, we were on the edge of our seats. Like some of the house guests, we were asleep for these 90 days. We will see why some of these went home. But I think it's very clear from those watching or listening at home why Chelsie won. But I'm excited to break it down with you, David.
Yeah, I mean, Chelsie got taken to the end by the final HOH winner and beat her unanimously. That is one heck of a feat.
It most definitely is. I mean, I think when we go back in the history of Big Brother, there's very few players who have accomplished such a unanimous win with also, I don't believe, any votes against. And to her pedigree, with 4 HOHs, which matches the most HOHs won in a season. Yep. I mean, truly an all-around player.
Yes. Now, because we did not do a separate podcast for Rubina when she was eliminated on Thursday, we have 4 people to talk about here. So, yes, we will even cover McKenzie, even though she insisted her game spoke for itself. But we will evaluate them all in the usual way by comparing how they played to my rules for winning Big Brother, which I originally wrote 20 years ago in 2004 and have modified ever since. We will analyze their actions using what we saw on TV, live feeds, interviews, and other information. And of course, the most recent version of those rules is at robhaswebsite.com/bigbrotherrules. In case, someone out there listening or watching is planning to apply and wants to study up. Now, with that said, one of our normal podcasts goes an hour to an hour and a half. We don't want this to be 4+ hours. So we aren't going to be able to go into all the levels of detail we normally would. We will hit the most important points. We will not be giving every example. I was going through my notes. Don't need that example. And since this was a 90-day game, some things changed over the months anyway. And let's be honest, for 2 of these 4, there really isn't as much to talk about. Yeah.
The shade has started already. Yes. I'm glad we're starting early.
Now, we usually have some other things to discuss about the week in general before we get to the rules, but not this time. It's all about the Final Four and how they did in the rules. Now, we will have a final edition of our usual segment, Julie Chen Moonves is wrong about blank, but it'll come at the end of the rules because that's where it makes the most sense. Now, I do want to say, of course, that before we get to the rules, we should mention that there is a Survivor version or rather, there is a poster of the Survivor version of the rules, which you can get at robhaswebsite.com/yxlostfeed. Go there, scroll down, click order. You can also keep scrolling and get the poster on a t-shirt or get the checklist on a t-shirt, which is the same that I'm wearing. I'm just wearing it backwards in honor of the person who won. So again, you can go to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed. So if you don't have anything else, let's head into the rules.
Let's do it. I'm all for it.
Chelsie did a great job of laying out the important aspects of her winning game in her final 2 responses and speech. McKenzie accidentally also did a great job of laying out the important aspects of why she didn't win. But while both of those had the highlights, there was a lot more to the intricacies of the situations. And, we'll also see what we can dig up for Cam and Rubina as well. At RHAP, we know reality TV, and we know why Chelsie won and McKenzie, Cam, and Rubina lost. Ooh. Now, the first and most important rule is to scheme and plot. Of the final 4 players, only one actually understood that, and that was, of course, Chelsie. And I don't think it's a coincidence that she's the biggest fan among the group. As Joseph told Entertainment Weekly way back after he was voted out, Chelsie is playing the best game by far. She's been the best player since day 1, day 2, and I knew it from the get-go. Now, I have to acknowledge myself that way back in our preview podcast, I did not have a good feeling about Chelsie. But my opinion changed immediately upon seeing her the very first week. Right off the bat, she maneuvered herself around being downgraded, and she had daily camera chats where she showed that she understands the game. Chelsie has been behind many of the moves made this season, especially moves made by other people, like, of course, McKenzie, but also was a significant force behind evicting Joseph, Quinn, and Leah, among others.
Chelsie was truly a unique player we've got to see, and similar to you, and many of our viewers and listeners can probably attest to this, is that initially in our preseason ranking of how we thought each player would do in comparison to these rules, we weren't the highest on Chelsie. If anything, we were kind of lower on Chelsie and Cedric because of his youth, and we kind of attested that to Chelsie. Unsure how she will play the game. Sometimes being a huge fan means that you're the moment becomes so big for you that you get excited to play the game and you forget kind of everything you know.
Mm-hmm.
And we were kind of like proven that, oh, maybe we were right about our rankings week one when they both got downgraded and we're like, they're in trouble. But to our surprise, they were not even a target because they had maneuvered themselves so well. And for Cedric, unfortunately, his time was cut short. But for Chelsie, she continued that wave throughout the game, from maneuvering herself from ally to ally to winning competitions. But more than anything, her ability of mist. I mean, the way she was able to use her mist and confuse her closest allies or convince them that they should sabotage their game for her game. I mean, I don't know how you can be a fan of Big Brother and love strategy and gameplay and not recognize the kind of game Chelsie played. I mean, this was great to watch.
Yeah, and she told us what type of game she was going to play early on, way back in early August. There was a key moment that gave us, and by us, I mean mostly live feed viewers, insight into how she was thinking. And I say live feed viewers because it wasn't on TV. Now, if you follow me on my various video locations, then, you saw this as a video because I put it up. But beyond that, the house guests were about to play a game of Mafia to pass the time. They did this fairly frequently early on. And it was funny because a lot of the live feed viewers were like, stop playing that game and start playing the game of Big Brother. But Chelsie used it as a way to kind of compare the two because she was giving a camera chat with Brooklyn in the background, nodding along with her as they were getting ready to go play Mafia. And Chelsie noted that lying is part of the game of Mafia. And you don't go into it saying, I'm going to be as pure as possible. She said, this is not church. This is the game. If you're playing the game, that's part of the game. So don't come into Big Brother and say you want to keep your morals intact. Quote, this ain't Uno. This ain't Monopoly. This ain't Twister. This is Big Brother. Play the game. And obviously, we can see how Chelsie did that all the way until the end, while McKenzie, she did exactly what Chelsie said not to do by, keeping her loyalty and morals.
And, I will test that. I was a bit higher on McKenzie's game throughout the entirety of it because I saw her, the way she was playing, kind of given some bad hands in the beginning where her allies went home. She doesn't understand the game and kind of gets her footing through her competition wins and finds herself parts of different alliances. The issue is that we didn't see the moves we wanted to see her make for her own game. And I think that really differentiates her journey from Chelsea's, from the intentional moves you make, from strategy, from winning competitions versus McKenzie's was kind of raw skill that she did to win things and put herself in places. There was not much intentionality in it.
Right.
And we see that really come head at the end where to win this game, the end game is a different beast, than the rest of the season. So if you don't plan out each place or if you don't make that right move at the end, it doesn't matter how much you lead up to it. You can take any journey to get there. We agree there are certain rules that help you have a better chance to get there. But the final move you have to make is to ensure your own ability to win it. And we saw who did that best.
Yeah. And so you mentioned intentionality, and that is something that we saw out of Chelsie because I say we saw, we, the viewers, saw it. The other players did not, because other than the camera talk with Brooklyn there, Chelsie pretty much kept her strategic side to the diary rooms and private camera chats. She told Mike Bloom, none of the house guests, I think, knew how strategic I was behind the scenes, how hardcore, how direct I was in my decision making. I think they thought I was just living my best life in the Big Brother house. There was not a moment that went by in Big Brother that I was not thinking or strategizing. But I kept that to myself. Every move I made in this game, every decision, every conversation was calculated. And that, I think, got me this far. And I agree with her. I think that got her this far too. Looking back in the game, she had several different alliances, named and unnamed. She and Cam agreed to look out for each other early on, and that obviously continued all the way through. Though part of that at the end, I think, was she saw how easy he would be to beat. She and T-Core were also looking out for each other, and she even tried to save T-Core when the time came, but was smart enough not to push so hard that it endangered her own game when she saw it wasn't going to go that way. She was in the Pentagon and the collective. And when it all fell apart, she laid low for a couple weeks before beginning her rebuild, which does lead to an important point that we should know. She did a great job. She wasn't perfect. Nobody is. I mean, maybe me. But other than that, in the game, she and Brooklyn got too comfortable and passive for a little while, which led to the flip against Cedric and the blowing up of those alliances. And indeed, we discussed on the Why Brooklyn Lost and Why Cedric Lost podcasts that Brooklyn and Chelsie were kind of on cruise control at the time, letting relationships with McKenzie and Leah lapse so their numbers were left hanging in the wind. But two things happened at that point. First, while Brooklyn sulked and whined and complained about what happened, Chelsie went to work. She immediately started talking to people and shoring up relationships and locking in votes, to the point that by the end of that week, people would have been willing to flip to save Chelsie if Brooklyn had won the AI arena. But they weren't going to do it for Brooklyn when Chelsie won. And then second, Chelsie learned from those mistakes and also made moves to start locking in McKenzie for the future, which obviously paid huge dividends, literally.
Yeah, no, you make a great point there, Dave. And I think one thing I've realized watching and just being a fan of both shows from Survivor and Big Brother, that's kind of the difference with Big Brother is that when you make a mistake or something happens like this, there's enough time to steer the ship back. And that's when we talk about how our players are flexible, how they do this.
Mm-hmm.
And Chelsie, she steered that ship right back to it. And like you said, she went to work. I mean, I think one of the greatest moves she made in this game that wasn't really talked about finale night was her connection to T-Core. I mean, figuring out who was the head of that flip, connecting with them and ensuring that, hey, we have a bond. We want to go forward together. And because of that, that shored her up with Chemo. That shored her up with Rubina. And it helped her from a flip that should have basically put her game back into a hole she was able to come out of. I mean, it's very impressive to see, okay, I went wrong. This is what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what do I do to change the trajectory of my, my game going right now? And the difference is we didn't see that out of McKenzie. We didn't really see that, and just to loop them in there with Cam or Rubina very much, where it was like, hey, we need to now play differently. We didn't see that from each of these players. And to McKenzie's credit, it's impressive it worked as long as it did for her, I believe, because she was able to brute force her way through the game in so many measures and still have connections with people and not really rub people the wrong way. McKenzie probably could have played one of the cleanest games from her view and some other viewers' viewpoints if she just made that right move at the end. And, it was laid out for her. And that's why I think it's most frustrating to see what happened.
Yeah, and I'll have plenty of thoughts on McKenzie's move or lack thereof. But even going back to early on, and let me just get this out of the way now, because you said, McKenzie pushed her way through the game, and other people have said, well, she made it to final two. By my view, McKenzie did not make it through the game. Chelsie puppeted McKenzie through the game. If Chelsie had not wanted McKenzie there, I do not think McKenzie would have been there. Sure, she won, comps and saved herself, but not every comp. There were times Chelsie could have gotten rid of her if she wanted to, but it was much more advantageous to keep her there. And And that's, even way back at the beginning of the game, Chelsie, kind of treated McKenzie like clay that she could mold. Um, and even in McKenzie's final two answers, she talked about getting herself out of trouble earlier. But it was Chelsea's advice at that point that guided her, even back then, telling her how to do things like talk to people, explaining to her way back in early August how you need numbers in Big Brother and it's a long game and playing safe in the beginning is playing smart. And then after that break that I mentioned, where she kind of let McKenzie and Leah drift, when she pulled her back in, Chelsie told Dalton Ross, I controlled her game for the second half of this game. Even when she won, she did everything that I led her to do. And the jury knew that. And McKenzie obviously was the most important person Chelsie controlled, but it wasn't the only one. She didn't just have one puppet. There were other examples throughout the season. Another good one was when Chelsie took out Leah's allies twice in a row. But then Leah decided to trust her after Chelsie had basically one conversation with her. I mean, Leah came in to Chelsie like, I'm mad at you, and walked away apologizing after Chelsie took out two of her allies. We heard in the finale and also on live feeds earlier, Chelsie was a great speaker and used the power of her words. And I talked on a previous podcast about her planting those seeds and watering them slowly and letting her ideas grow in someone else's mind to the point that they did not even realize it was happening.
She had the gift of gab,
Yeah.
it really, the way she could have conversations. And what I also enjoyed watching Chelsie play in a lot of ways, it was that even the players who would go home or they were just coming out the door, she would make them feel,
Mhm.
special in different ways from how she, we'll talk more about that, her jury management with it, but her relationship with Quinn in ways, in how when she knew he was going home, he knew he was going home essentially, the way she made time spent, try to set him up with Leah. And that's what I appreciated out of her game from all forms of it. There was a drive to win.
Mhm.
She wanted to win so badly that she was able to ensure that all of the moves she made would benefit her in the game, but also just enjoy, live in the house that way, And I think watching her was a pleasure because you could see her work 24/7 on figuring out how can I
Yes.
win this game. And I mean, as viewers and as people who commentate on this season and show on People's Strategy, what more can we ask for, right? Uh, and who she went against too. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, I know I put a little nicer that maybe manipulate than puppeteer McKenzie, but she had to figure out a line to walk here because McKenzie, in all terms, could have turned on her at any moment if she
Yes.
really did want to. She was able to win these competitions, so it's kind of like playing with fire. How close can you get to the fire without it burning you? And so that was the cool thing, and it I think on a rewatch, it's going to be even more fun to watch that portion of how does Chelsie manage these players around her who really could burn her up in any moment. Who she backstabbed Cam, who he should have been like, "Hey, let me burn her up." All
Mhm.
these players, Leah, you put a perfect example how she takes out her allies, but figures out a way how to manage it. I mean, that's impressive to be in the kitchen like that and not get boiled by the water.
Yeah, I mean, she you say it'll be fun on a rewatch. Unfortunately, a lot of this was hidden on TV itself, only on the live feeds, which of course they're not allowing anyone to save, although I know there are places out there that have them. But um it's yeah, it is interesting how she managed to do that. But you say it's playing with fire. I say she played with fire, but she also had an asbestos suit on, because she knew that the fire wasn't going to come back at her. She knew which way the wind was blowing because she was blowing the wind, she was causing it to blow in other directions.
That I hope she gets to see that portion. If anything, she gets a clip she sees is that portion. I think that that really does capsulate her game. She was the win. She blew the direction. Yes, in a lot of ways. But I will say though, there has to be a level of courage and to be playing with that trio for so long. She did
Hmm.
with Rubina, T-Core, and Chemo, and not worrying that they'll turn on you, and having other people around you take them out. I
Right.
mean, I think that portion was impressive with me. And I wonder if the pendulum swung a little bit more for Chelsie when she realized McKenzie would take out Leah and knew that she's in her pocket. At that point, taking out your closest ally from me. I think so many times, and I've said this many times before, it's tough when you're in the Big Brother house because sometimes it's a rotten apple and you're a worm in the apple, so you can't see how the outside looks like from the inside there. And so these players truly could not see how Chelsie was basically, she wasn't a worm in the apple, she was the apple.
Yeah.
And she was able to do whatever she wanted in there.
Yeah. I, I mean, she even did things like incorporating events that occurred and using them to push a plan she already had in mind. So, like, if she wanted to move a certain way and then something happened, she would use that to her advantage. So, a good example is Angela came to her with that delusionary story that one night that Angela was up and heard Quinn and Leah laughing and determined it must be this whole complex thing that Quinn and Leah were joining forces with T-Core, Chemo, and Rubina. It didn't matter to Chelsie that the whole thing was false. She knew it was false. What mattered was that she could use it to get other people thinking the way she wanted them to think about Quinn and could target him. And then the same thing happened when she wanted McKenzie to nominate and evict Leah, but McKenzie was holding out. And then Rubina told her about Leah mentioning, oh, she wished she'd made a big move the prior week and even said Chelsea's name. Well, Chelsie used that to show McKenzie that she was supposedly in danger and Leah wasn't trustworthy. As she told Mike Bloom, she would lay things out, quote, to get people to look at the other side of the coin and make other people be threats. I just didn't reveal that I was a bigger threat than everybody.
Yeah, I mean, she stood in the middle of the shooting ground, was able to dodge all these bullets and make sure they would shoot themselves. I mean, I go back and forth and thinking about how she managed the Angela situation, and basically making Angela vote for her, who seemed so bitter,
Mm-hmm.
against her, and then got her vote there. Because I think people realized is that she wasn't the one really pulling the trigger on many things. She was just maneuvering people to do that to themselves, and that's just an impressive ability there. I will say, I think it's interesting as we talk about all our players as our winners too, and some of our losers today too, with the regarding Cam. I think it was impressive how Cam was very close. We saw to McKenzie at some point, to Lee at some point, and then even though there was a little rift between Cam and Chelsie, she was able to keep him
Mm-hmm.
in her group of people, not just in her group of people, her small circle of him and her,
Yes.
where at the end he self-professes, I would take her. She became one of the dogs at the crib because he was shouting her out at the end. And he was willing to not just vote her through there, but make her a winner. I mean, he was basically the best ally you could hope for in a game where you can do whatever you would want to him, and they're still going to vote for you to win, and also vote with you each week and out. I mean,
Yes.
she was a power duo with him without it being seen like that.
Right. Right. Yeah. Now, since you mentioned moving on to other players, I think we can move to McKenzie. Um, you may disagree, but I don't think I'm being overly mean or harsh when I say simply that McKenzie had no idea how to play this game from a strategic standpoint. I mean, she came in barely having watched it. She admitted she didn't even really make it through the whole season, in watching it. She admitted and then showed that she was gullible and naive. Um, and I could go on, but I won't. No need to completely keep. Well, yeah, I've still got a lot more to say. Now, this was all a main reason she had a rough time early. She was wandering without a home until Chelsie snagged her and reeled her in. And then Chelsie filled the empty spot in her head where strategy should have been with whatever thoughts Chelsie wanted to have. I mean, she We talked about her planting seeds. She planted a whole dang garden in Mackenzie's head.
Not the garden.
Yeah. It was like a chia pet in there. And, while Mackenzie insisted in response to a jury question that nobody can influence me, I made decisions for myself, the facts tell a very different story. All the way up to and including Mackenzie telling Mike Bloom after giving away $675,000 that for her, Chelsie winning was herself winning. No, Mackenzie, it was not. Chelsie winning was you losing.
We should be sitting here talking about why McKenzie won today in almost every universe, because this is probably one of the most egregious final two pulls there. I know there's arguments about all different seasons. BB20 goes back. I mean, people taking somebody to the end who beats them. This one is the one we're going to look back and be like, why? Why did you do such a thing?
Well, we're explaining why.
Yeah, I mean,
Why
we're
here.
explaining why, but I have to believe that she resigned herself to win number two no matter what, because there was no fathomable way she could go. And here's the thing: is if you were going pound for pound, let's say, go for win, HOH, Chelsie was no slouch against the wins. If anything,
No.
she tied the record. So it's one of those things where you don't have a perceivable advantage in any of the categories where it's like, I crushed you here, even if you crushed me here. It wasn't that thing. She was so well rounded. So for Mackenzie, it was really tough because I was a little nicer, and I will be nicer to Mackenzie in this push. She was one of our people recruited, I believe, on the show. Didn't really know what was going on. And she was trying to figure it out as it went through it. We saw from our first week romance going away, from all her allies getting blown up, and she found her footing. The issue was that every move she made, like you said, I think she thought they had her best interests in mind. I think she forgot that they're trying to win it too, and that was reflected in all her strategy.
Yeah, and I think that that's an important point that she, like I said, I don't think she watched a full season. She did not know what was important. She did not know how to play this game. And I'm sorry if anyone thinks that sounds mean. It is just a simple fact. She did not know. And who was she getting most of her advice from? Chelsie. And we'll see that as we go through and we talk about some of the end game stuff later on too, because Chelsie was the one telling her how to play. Well, when you're getting advice from your competitor, like maybe you should be thinking about that. Like if the quarterback tells the opposing, the opposing cornerback, I'm going to be throwing it directly to the guy you're guarding so you can intercept it. Maybe you should think, is he really going to do that? If the pitcher tells you, I'm going to be throwing a fastball right down the center, so you should just swing right there, maybe you should wonder if that's really true. And yet that is what Chelsie was doing. Now, the difference is it wasn't just two teams for most of the way. Most of the time, Mackenzie felt they were working together. They were working together the same way a puppeteer and a puppet work together. But so it seemed like Chelsie had Mackenzie's best interests at heart. But it was really Chelsea's best interests at heart that just happened to coincide with, and Mackenzie will do these things and will think that, I'm on her side. So it was kind of like, I guess the best example I could be is if you two, you're on a team. Well, maybe it's like boxers or MMA fighters who train together in the same gym, and they train together and they train together. And then suddenly they're in opposition. Well, now you know their moves if they've been truly helping you, but maybe you held a few things back. Maybe you didn't tell them certain things.
No, very much so. I mean, I love all the analogies right there because it is very much likened to that. And I think a lot of people who might just stumble onto the show, and I don't imagine this any of our viewers or listeners if they're actually here, but they feel like Big Brother is just kind of a social game in the sense of that
Mhm.
it's, there's not, you just have to be there, be nice, or figure out a way to cut through some. There's such a level of strategy to it each week, figuring out, going through the scenarios in your head. I mean, it's like playing a game of chess, but you don't know how to play the end game of chess. And if you don't know how to do that, you're really lost when you play against somebody who knows how to play because there's so many different forms of strategy to kind of make somebody who might be incredibly intelligent, smart at it, but they don't know the rules. And I think that
Yeah.
was the issue for Mackenzie. She didn't know how to maneuver herself through that. And her other closest allies weren't really helping very much. We had Leah and we had Angela right here. I'm not counting Matt because Matt was out early, but Leah and Angela basically were shooting themselves off the foot too every single moment they could get. I mean, Angela, we saw the type of player she was. I mean, was she entertaining? Very much so. Was she a wrecking ball that would devour anybody around her? Yes, she was. And Leah, I mean, I could go all day on
Yeah.
Leah. I mean, but we saw what she did to her own ally. So
Right.
Chelsea was basically the shining morning star. And I think that's what made it difficult for McKenzie too. That if it was a one side versus the other side, maybe she could start seeing like, all right, I know I need to cut, her
Right.
eventually. But when you have this small group of people where you're taking down each side, eventually you're like, I gotta trust my bestie, and that's what she did.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've been talking about Mackenzie's, not knowing what's going on. And I have a few examples of her strategic aimlessness early. In the very first week, Mackenzie was talking about going after Angela while Angela was the HOH and before she had even made nominations. Now, anyone who's watched Big Brother and paid any attention knows you don't do that. Um, eh, you know, she escaped from that. In the early to mid game, we would see her doing things like lobbying the wrong people, such as talking to the HOH after final nominations had been set and it wasn't up to the HOH anymore. No, that's not the person you need to convince now. It's the voters. Back in early to mid August, she said, I don't know where I lie in this house. That should have told her the answer of where she lies in the house, but it didn't. Then around that same time, she was on the block, but realized, I haven't talked game with anyone all day. Yeah, that's a problem. By that evening, Leah was coaching her on how to campaign. Even when she did try to campaign, she would say unhelpful things like, I didn't do anything wrong or I never lied to anyone, as if this was a contest of morality, which she never seemed to learn it wasn't. And then a little later, she told T-Core she didn't really know who to work with because no one talked game with her. And indeed, I think she may have spent more time telling others she couldn't get into any alliances than she actually did trying to get into alliances. She just did not know how to go about it. As Brooklyn told Dalton Ross in her exit interview, Mackenzie was, quote, confused and not in anything. And as Mackenzie herself said around that same time, there's a lot I'm not aware of. You don't say. And then of course she also said, I read people real well, in literally the same conversation as she was reading people completely wrong, which, was kind of a theme through the season, but it was just one more thing of, Mackenzie thinking she was in one position, but not understanding how it goes.
Yeah, I think the way I've been thinking about this since it's happened and whatnot, this finale, which hasn't been many days, but ruminating over it, I feel like for Mackenzie, maybe she was feeling like she was playing with house money in the sense that she came into the game not sure like how's this going to work, how's it going to happen. I should go out this week or that week, and she made it this far. That she was just happy to finally get to this point, her winning these competitions. Like, and that's I think also what we see for a lot of people who are either recruited or who just stumble on this show where they're like these competition wins mean I must be doing really good in the game. Like, this
Mm-hmm.
should show people that I deserve to win
And
versus a lot.
and to be fair, look at Jag last season.
Yeah.
Uh, you know,
Yes, I will say Jag had some other maneuvers there
I
too. I
know,
mean,
but and we talked about that almost
yeah,
exactly a year ago, or roughly a
yeah.
year ago. But um, but I do think that the casual viewer could watch it and go, "Oh, Jag won a bunch of cops
Hmm.
and he won the game. Look at that."
Yeah, no, and I think that's very good. And I think for McKenzie probably felt that way, but she probably couldn't view all the moves Chelsie was doing in the game because she hasn't watched how other juries probably have deliberated to win these things. She hasn't seen those things. So when you know as a super fan, and we saw it within the jury from T-Core, we saw from, I think it was Quinn, I'm trying to remember who else might have mentioned it, but they talked about like, we want to see more than just competition wins because that's kind of, as viewers and longtime fans, where condition, especially with Big Brother, we're like, this is a holistic game from every A to Z. We don't want to see you just excel in one portion of it. So it's one of those things. I wonder if that'll be easier for her to digest how she's feeling about it. But I always ask this question: do you feel like, David, if McKenzie came back, would she have a much better chance to be able to win, knowing what she does know, if she doesn't have a big target on her back?
I mean, on the one hand, one prime example we can look at is Cody. He made a very similar stupid move at the end and, claimed it was due to loyalty. And then he came back and controlled the game. Now, he got coached up before coming back and controlling the game. And, but I don't know. She would need, I mean, she's only 22. She would need to get past some of that admitted naivete and gullibility. She would need to look back and recognize what she did wrong. Look back and see this is really a game. I think it's too soon to say whether she would be able to do that in, say, 5 years' time.
Yeah.
I don't have high hopes. A lot of it depends on whether she can admit to herself what she did wrong. Cody still maintains he did the right thing when he did it. It's easier to say once you've also won after doing it, but he maintained it all the way up to going into that All-Stars. So that's a tough one. I do not have high hopes, but we would have to see. Now, as far as, getting back to this season, we already discussed how Chelsie manipulated McKenzie, so I don't want to completely rehash it. It's just one of those facts. But, for example, one reason McKenzie didn't want to flip against Leah was she was afraid of losing her jury vote, which, by the way, she outright told other people. Again, showing her lack of understanding of the game. Like, you don't tell people, I don't want to do this because I'm afraid of losing her jury vote. You have now handed over all of the information to them. But anyway, Chelsie used that information to convince her she would gain more votes at the end by making the move because jurors would respect it. By the time McKenzie flipped, that had become so ingrained in her mind that I don't know if she even realized that Chelsie had planted it there. And, she even said, I think about everything. I'm not a seasoned veteran of this game, but I'm a smart effing cookie. And that's one reason it's so hard to answer your question, because it will require some actual deep self-reflection on her part. And it wasn't just that Chelsie would plant idea after idea. She had like a complete grip on her brain, to the point that when Rubina told McKenzie that Chelsie suggested taking a shot at her in the double eviction, if that were anyone else, you'd be like, oh, that's a problem. No, McKenzie goes back to Chelsie and says, is that true? What did she expect Chelsie to say? Oh, yes, I was plotting against you. No, she said no, and McKenzie believed her because the grip on her brain. And this was not even the only time that the situation played out. McKenzie would sway in the breeze and went with whoever convinced her, which in the early game was sometimes whoever talked to her last, but became Chelsie 100% of the time almost once Chelsie locked her in. And I have to add, maybe the funniest thing McKenzie did the whole game was at one point she gave Angela a speech about how she had to play her own game.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of things in retrospect that it's going to come back to the players to look back at and be like, ooh, did I really say that or need to say that? I think you make a lot of good points there, Dave, and I think it's important to also note at her age at 22. I always forget how young she actually is in this. It's
I mean, how old were you when you played?
I was 22 as well. So
Yeah, so
I
it
mean,
can't. It's not all ascribed to age.
yeah,
There is
I know.
age plus super fandom. I mean,
Yeah,
you knew what was going on. You faced a situation that she did not have to face, and but if you had got, if you hadn't had a Jackson in the house, if you hadn't faced that situation when you were playing, you would have known what was going on.
I
You know,
hope to think, but there's a lot of naivety in there too, and I mean, there's a lot of mistakes you make in it. But at the end of the day, right, we have to compare you for your season
right?
and what goes on. And for McKenzie right here, who she was going against, it's the levels were so different here compared to
Yes.
her and Chelsie there. I don't know if that's as much an excuse that happens to some of our other players that who lost, because for McKenzie's credit, she still fought. Whether she fought the right direction, whether she ran in the opposite way, it's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever watched shows like little pee-wee football games where it's like these little like 8, 7-year-olds playing, and they'll grab the football and run the opposite direction. You're like, no, 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 go the other way, go the other way. That's sometimes, unfortunately, how I felt McKenzie was playing the game. It was just Chelsea saying, actually, our goalpost now is that way. And so, for players like Cam and Rubina, unfortunately, I don't think there was as many
Yeah.
excuses. There's for me, unless you want to speak more on McKenzie on these portions, I was just going to liken it to with Rubina. We've covered so much about Rubina on T cores and chemos, why they went home. It's very similar to Rubina's because they were that trio who all played together. But I did appreciate her in the final and try to make some peace in McKenzie. I mean, I wonder if there's a realm of where Rubina gets a couple votes and makes a competitive battle against McKenzie. I like him to say yes, but more than Cam. More than Cam.
Yeah, I would say that, and we'll get to Cam in a moment here. I would say Rubina had marginally more strategy than Cam did. Marginally.
Marginally?
Marginally. A lot of what we could say about Rubina, we've already said about T-Core and Chemo. So I encourage people to go listen to those podcasts if they haven't already. It was a lot of the same thing. The three of them hanging out together, talking about what they should do, and then never doing it. When she was nominated at various times, she either put up no fight or very little, instead complaining to those close to her who couldn't change anything. And she even said at one point, I feel like I wasn't cut out for this game. And then later also said, I don't want the season to be in vain. I don't want backstabbing to win. I want good people to win. And of course, she was one of the good people in question and wanted to change the game in that way. Now, the thing is, Rubina did have flashes of understanding. More than McKenzie did, I would say. She and Chemo talked about how they had to go after people if they wanted to make it to the end. And when she was up against Chemo, she actually did something to keep herself in the game, unlike him. But it was minuscule compared to what she should have been doing. And that really did show at the very end what you were talking about. When she put off talking to McKenzie day after day, when McKenzie was literally the only vote. You didn't have to go around the whole house. You had to talk to one person. She kept planning to talk to her and then not doing it. And she would like literally see her hanging around and be like, maybe not now. And then she finally did it so late in the week that McKenzie was offended that she hadn't talked to her sooner. And more importantly, the plan was already locked into McKenzie's brain. There was nothing Rubina could have said that was going to change it. She could have said, you and I will get to the end, and if I win, I will give you half. And it would not have changed it.
Which is so sad to hear because it's the truth in the matter of how it would have played out. But the thing is that Rubina had the best. She could have had the best argument, and she talks about it a little too late, per se. But argument that like, hey, like if you take me out here, Chelsie and Cam are essentially a duo.
Mm-hmm.
Chelsie is the one to beat right here. Our best chances are probably you and I to make it here. And even Cam's pitch to McKenzie wasn't the greatest one. where he was like, "Yeah, I'll probably go with you, and we'll see. I
Right.
may get it." Like it wasn't even believable. So she had all the right tools here, and I want to think that maybe if Rubina was able to get to McKenzie throughout the game and have some of those individual chats, especially when they were basically
Well, let me
kind
just
of
stop you there. You say was able to. She was able to. She
yeah,
just did
yes,
not do it. Sorry, I just wanted to.
no, you're right. You're right. I appreciate you putting that input because she was with her along for a while. That trio of people who stayed there, and
Mhm.
she was the last of those trios. There was a lot of time to bond with Mackenzie, and also for a long time, Mackenzie was viewed as kind of a solo dolo player because she didn't really have quite a home within an alliance. I mean, she had the Angela group, she had the
Mhm.
Lydia group, but then she was taking him out. It would have been such a good time for them to connect. I mean, that was kind of our criticism with them. Unfortunately, that key core chemo Rubina trio that they kind of stayed so insulated. Um, but it just hurts to see that Rubina actually had the tools to kind of take those people who she played the game with and them in the jury. So that's 2 locked votes in a jury of 7 and kind of have a chance to make it to the end. I mean, she just needed Chelsie not to win out, which Chelsie didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay, we can move on to Cam pretty quickly here because there just isn't a whole lot to say about him in this role. I think he knew much of what was going on, but he mostly didn't take actions to affect the outcome of what that was. As Chelsie told Mike Bloom, Cam was, in my mind, a terrible Big Brother player, but a great person. Taryn said on the live feed recap early in the season, Cam had no knowledge of the game and wasn't trying. I mean, he barely talked strategy, which attracted some negative attention early on, but eventually that faded as he just became part of the furniture, the chameleon, like his comic book character. He did eventually start talking strategy, but it was almost always in service of whatever plan Chelsie had, like being a second voice in Mackenzie's ear, telling her the same things as Chelsie had said, or babysitting for Chelsie, babysitting Mackenzie for Chelsie. He occasionally had some influence on Chelsie, but I feel like it was usually more like a sounding board. Like, I don't know if you have those situations where it's like you talk something through and you realize that, oh, I should go a different way, even though the other person has barely said anything. So he was there. He may have made some points that helped convince her, but was it anything huge? No. I mean, it helped Chelsie. Even when it helped Chelsie to make a better move. And so as Angela told herself slash us at one point, Chelsie will do whatever she wants. Cam will do whatever Chelsie wants. And Chelsie even reamed him in a live feed camera talk this week, saying, among other things, that he did nothing all game. He sits in a room staring and says 2 words and calls it game talk.
I, I have no doubt that Cam, I would be a great person probably to hang out with,
Mm-hmm.
enjoy some time. In the context of the game, unfortunately, Cam truly was the best ally you want there because they will just be a vote for you. I mean, I have to imagine his vibes are just so great that people just wanted him around. I mean, because he didn't really try playing the game at all. And like you said, it was interesting because he kind of knew what was going on. It was just he just didn't want to act on any moves to make. I mean, he kind of talked about, see, like, I know I need to make a move at the end, and that move might be Chelsie. He was saying that the McKenzie,
Mm-hmm.
what she professes that no, I probably would have taken her to the end anyways when he was with his interview with
Right.
Julie. I mean, we see Cam play this version of a game where it's just like, all right, let's just like chill and see how far we can make it. I mean, you have to be so bad at competitions in general. I mean, for your allies eventually turn on you and be like, I don't think you're so bad at it. I want to vote you out because you're making us mad. And which is ironic that I love the juxtaposition of Cam being this like incredibly like strong man. I mean, this D1 athlete, and then he's sandwiched between Mackenzie and Chelsie for their own right. Look, very athletic and strong too, but you wouldn't think if you told me before my bets would have been lost if you told me Mackenzie's going to win like 11 competitions, Chelsea's going to like break or tie the HOH
Yeah.
wins in a season. And then you have Cam right here, who I think wins 1 competition the entire season. I mean, they got so upset that he wasn't pulling his weight. They're like, we want to vote you out.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess Cam's ability was that like it was good that he got in good with those two. I mean, like Angela said, I mean, he was the definition of a floater in this game.
I think he was a coaster,
A coaster.
technically.
Yeah, I mean, floater. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
something else. He was a Cam, you
Yeah.
know.
Right. Yes. He was the chameleon. Um, all right. That's been a lot on the first rule. And I can say that is the most time we will spend on any individual rule.
Mhm.
So we can move on to the second rule, which says not to scheme and plot too much and to keep your scheming secret. And as you might imagine, there isn't nearly as much to discuss here because, you know, 3 of our final 4 didn't scheme and plot anywhere near enough, let alone too much. Even so, Chelsie, McKenzie, and Rubina each had one minor issue with this rule that stood out to me. So I want to at least mention them. Chelsea's goes back to mid-August, the time we talked about when she and Brooklyn were well positioned in the collective and the Pentagon, but got a bit too comfortable, which also caused their position to become too obvious. That was a big part of the reason they were nominated together after things blew up on them. But that was a true wake-up call for Chelsie, and it jolted her into a new game mode that she rode for the rest of the season. So she never made a mistake like that again. Or at least I should say she didn't make a mistake that she wasn't already guarding against. Because by the time they were out in Jinky World, her trio with Cam and McKenzie was fairly obvious. It's just that nobody could or would do anything about it because of how she maneuvered.
Yeah, no, very much so. I mean, she really kind of when she faltered that initial time, and we say that, oh man, she might have overextended herself. She was quick to react and figure out how can I change into the game. And I think that's also a big important part of the game for most players. Every player is going to overplay at some point, or they're going to do something a little too much. It's just kind of how do you handle that stumble,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why I think it was really fun to watch Chelsie play this game. Is that she was the type of player where we've seen certain players. They stay in a position, they kind of fight their way up. Eventually, they get there, where they play such a perfect game where they were never touched. Chelsie flitted with danger. She wasn't scared of being around the fire. I mean, and when she learned it, like she's like, oh, this, it, I have a little niece. And so she was just walking around and stuff like that. And she just realized what static shock does when you rub on the carpet too much and things like that. She's like, all right, I'm not going to do that. And to liken that with Chelsie in the sense that, like, when she made that mistake, she's like, I'm not going to do that. I know my boundaries. Let me figure out a way around it. So it's very cool to see that play. But I mean, yes, we did see. I will, and I'll wait for this, but I do have some points for the other players, especially McKenzie, because I actually think she flittered on the wrong side of this rule.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, another group that was obvious was, of course, the foursome of Rubina, Tucker, T-Core, and Chemo. At that time, it was funny that Rubina was oblivious to the fact they came off as the tight 4 they were. She was surprised by this idea, just as she was later somewhat taken aback when she and Chemo would get put up on the block against each other. Her allies through the game were always so obvious.
Yeah, very much so. It was in each other's face. I mean, from the showmans to the just the connections of they only converse with one another. If anything, I know on finale night it was a big shocker for a lot of the houses that Tucker was the person who was sending those secret messages.
Mm-hmm.
But if anything, it was kind of one of the smarter ideas Tucker had in play. If it worked out well, unfortunately, didn't as well. But the idea of how do we hide us or like kind of put it away or just push it all in the open if it's already
Right.
in there. I like that, but yeah, for Rubina, they didn't try to hide it.
Right. And then as for McKenzie, her over scheming came way back in the first week. I mentioned already in the first rule that she talked about wanting Angela out before nominations even happened. And, she told various people that Angela was a huge social threat and needed to go soon. I said it before. She really was lucky to have made it past that early stage of the game.
Yeah, I would say because a big part of this rule is like you don't backstab until you need
Yeah.
to, and I think unfortunately for McKenzie, for me, she did this too much when she didn't need to with the Leah situation. I know some
Yes.
people will be like, "Hey, oh look at where she went and she made this far." Well, to our argument, she made there because Chelsie was really the one maneuvering that stuff. Leah would have been a proponent against Chelsie, and I think would have been able to convince McKenzie one way or the other, like, "Hey, we should get her out." And with Leah there, I think that changes the dynamic for McKenzie because then she has a lot more openings to the end. And I don't think Leah really backstabbed McKenzie. And I also think the way McKenzie with Angela relationship, after she put so much capital to kind of keep Angela around and her getting that ally or contributing to it was a big part of like, why do you bring these people along with you in the game to kind of just cut them off when you don't need to? And
Right.
I think that also bittered the jury. I truly think that because she cut Leah that way, Quinn was offended for Leah's behalf against McKenzie.
I think there was some of that. We'll get to more of that, later, of course. But I like to think anyway that Quinn was looking at it more from game mode. But yes, he definitely was more upset at McKenzie for doing it than Leah was herself. All right, we could go to the third rule, which talks about the need to be flexible. How do you think Chelsie?
Nothing for Cam, right?
No, I mean he barely schemed. How could he over scheme?
We need him to backstep more. That was what we needed.
Yes, exactly. He did. Yeah.
Oh, okay. But the rule number 3 is.
Yeah. How do you think Chelsie did in terms of being flexible?
I mean, I think I touched about this before too. I really think she did really well, especially on that initial blunder with that whole week with Brooklyn, seeing her allies go home, and then seeing Cedric kind of be shipped away. She was kind of, and I always say this, this is kind of where we go back and forth on it, that to show your flexibility, you need to be tested on it. And we saw that she was tested on it. But I also don't want to liken her flexibility just to that moment where she gets her game back on track. It's throughout the whole end game and the last 6 weeks, especially with her relationship with T-Core, when she knew when she needed to kind of put a little pressure to ensure that, hey, I'm good with you, trio, right? Your votes aren't against me. If you need to get somebody else, get them, but not me. And then when T-Core was in danger, her trying to help out, but then realizing, you know what, this might be a time for me to cut my losses here, because out of this trio, T-Core might be the only one who actually flips on me. These other two might not. So, I mean, she was a masterclass, I actually think, in this category, the more I think about it, because of the way she was able to maneuver herself. What do you think, David?
Yeah, I agree. She set herself up great, obviously, and you mentioned earlier that, for a while she was essentially in the middle of the house. She was safe with everyone. She had the T-Core trio on one side, a more jumbled group of individuals and duos on the other side, but no matter who was in power, she was fine. And this was one of the things she discussed in her jury responses and speech, that a major way she avoided ever being put on the block, so she didn't have to worry about winning comps to save her life. Most of the other players didn't even seem to notice it. Quinn did, as he at one point told Leah that if one of them win HOH, they are going to have a delicate conversation with Cam and McKenzie about Chelsie playing the middle. Now, frankly, I mean, that talk never happened, but if it had, I don't think it would have mattered, because Chelsie set herself up so well. Even as late as the final 3, she was with 2 players who were pretty much guaranteed to take her to the end so she could win.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about beforehand, but kind of the Richard Hatch version of Survivor, where no matter, he steps off the final immunity challenge, where basically, like, hey, one of you guys have to take me up there. That's what she was able to do at the end. I mean, very impressive, and that doesn't happen from somebody who doesn't decide to be able to figure out how she does things. But here's the thing I will say, one last thing on this portion, is that I think so many players go into the house saying, like, I want to stay within my code. I have a principle with it. She had her principle. She played within her means. Chelsie said, this is a game. This is how I'm going to play it, and this is what I'm going to do there. We saw her exactly do that. And I think that's the best version for a player to be flexible, is that give yourself the bandwidth. When you tell yourself you're not going to lie going into this game, when you tell yourself you're not going to do A, B, and C because you're worried about this and that. And again, I'm talking about game-wise. There's things that outside of the game that don't need to be needed in there.
Right.
Within the game reason, if you should allow yourself to have that flexibility. So we're seeing players that we're about to talk about who are so inflexible is because they didn't allow themselves to even have the option to do that. They didn't say, hey, I want to
just say McKenzie. Just say McKenzie. I mean,
McKenzie, but I think it was Rubina as well. McKenzie, Rubina, and I don't know. I want to say Cam. He just didn't care. So I think he was okay with doing it. He just didn't care to do it, But yeah, McKenzie and Rubina for sure.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess, should I even ask you about McKenzie? Because she made it clear over and over and in her interviews that she was, I mean, you likened someone to a brick earlier this season when it came to flexibility. if anyone was a brick, it was Makensy. She just wanted to stick to her so-called loyalty and morals.
She was, and she wasn't just, she was a wall of bricks cemented together with titanium and some added things there. I mean, this is the stuff they put in front of houses, so soft floods. This is
Mhm.
you're not getting through Mackenzie with that. And yeah, I mean, it's so unfortunate because if there was one rule, if we changed for somebody for them to actually potentially win the game, it would have been this rule. If Mackenzie is just more flexible, especially at the end, I think she leaves with $750,000.
Yeah, yeah. Was there anything to discuss about Cam here?
He didn't need to be flexible. There was no test for him to be flexible. I mean, the moment when Chelsie kept him out of the vote and kept his initial game, like
Mhm.
in pre-jury, and then she was like, "I'm sorry, I had to do this to you." He's like, "That sucks. I wish you let me in here." He's like, "Maybe I shouldn't trust her." And then he goes back into trusting her.
Right.
We
Yeah.
realized that was going to be his trajectory.
Yes. And for Rubina, I'll just say, I said it for chemo. She had one alliance without any sub alliances or side alliances. So again, not flexible at all.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go to the fourth rule then, which says players should not let their emotions control them. Chelsie certainly understood the importance of this rule, though sometimes she did let her emotions run away with her a bit, especially when it came to Cam and a couple of the women. It looked a lot like jealousy, but she later claimed in interviews that it was more because she worried he'd screw up their strategic position. I don't know if I buy that. But even with it happening a couple times, she did move past her anger fairly quickly. Sometimes it took a few days, but even in the game of Big Brother, a few days is fairly quickly. Um, you know, and she told Cam at one point when, Cam said, "Well, I'm a little worried about you being mad at me." And she said she had never made a game move out of anger. And she's she's right, she didn't. And on the flip side, she also didn't make any game moves out of the good side of emotion. We say there are two sides. Like when she was planning to vote out Quinn, she cried a bit, but then she pulled herself together because she knew and she told herself Quinn would make a game decision. I have to make a game decision.
Yeah, I think she's a really good example of a player that has emotions, but she doesn't let them control her.
Right.
I mean, when I mean that by game logic, I mean here's the thing: everyone has their feelings. There's only so much you can do
Mm-hmm.
about having a crush on somebody or feeling this way about that, right? But letting that impact your game, I don't really think she did too much. I mean, yes, she'd have a conversation too, and maybe we would have a different conversation if some of the other players it got back to Cam and Cam was like, "Oh, I can't trust her anymore." That never happened. And so, unlike a player like Angela, who really let her emotions completely control her game, where when she got upset, she's going at somebody. Mackenzie, excuse me, Chelsie was the polar opposite of that. So, it was good to see because I think that's where we ranked her. I was worried about too initially from their interviews, and they're talking about it, how they're going to do this and that, whether this would be an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Was not an issue at all.
Yeah. Now, Mackenzie's whole game was more like Angela's, totally based on emotions. And yes, she called it loyalty or whatever. It boils down to emotions, which is one reason she was so easy to manipulate for Chelsie and for others if they had tried harder. The biggest and most obvious example of this was her final decision to evict Cam and give away $675,000. She can claim all she wants about her choice, whatever she wants. But the fact is, it was all emotion. And the way she's talked about it continues to prove that. Plus, these emotions were stoked even further by Chelsie over the course of weeks. I I don't want to get too much into this. I don't think it's a coincidence that Chelsie and McKenzie appear to have similar religious views. And I think once Chelsie realized that, I think and similar views about family and the importance of family. And I think Chelsie was able to use that to connect with Mackenzie even more and than some other people might have. I do think Mackenzie was, as I said earlier, clay for someone to mold in her hand, and Chelsie was extremely good at that. But there were even extra things that Chelsie picked out. Ooh, I can use this as an emotional lever against her.
I mean, that's an interesting take. I think, David. I mean, but I do say I think that she definitely connected with her through those things, whether it
Yeah.
was the trauma within the house, whether it was the similar values that they hold in their personal life. She was able to reinforce that we have a very strong bond. We have a sisterly bond, and we should go to the end
Hmm.
together. And for, like we said before, with McKenzie, she was playing the game and operating the game under no knowledge of the game in a way, and she expected that Chelsie, all the moves she's doing for Chelsie, because of course, since we have all these connections in our personal lives, you're probably thinking out for me as well. It's a
Right.
beneficial thing, a two-way beneficial thing. And if anything, Chelsea, it was a beneficial thing for McKenzie in so many ways. It got her all the way to final two. It was just that she needed to be able to make that cut. And I have to believe that if Chelsea won that final HOA, she would have made that cut very quickly too.
I don't think she would have made the cut. She said she was going. I mean, she said in all her interviews that she was going with McKenzie to the end.
I
It's easy to say that at the end, and not want to turn. I don't know. You will never know.
You will never
You know,
know. I just think it's one of those things that at this point she would never get any more favor from, like, she's saying I wouldn't take McKenzie. And
right?
it's like I I would find it hard if one of my friends, my good friend, she probably still cares about it, took me to the end and basically gifted me
Yeah,
$750,000 and me to turn around and be like, I wouldn't have taken them.
yeah,
So who knows? Maybe it's completely valid, but I
yeah.
like to think that she would have made the game move and been like, you know what?
Right.
I know who I need to take.
Yeah. I do want to give one other example because I mentioned a couple things about McKenzie being, being susceptible to emotional manipulation, for lack of a better term. Um, and another good example was the Leah situation. She was friends with Leah. She would not flip on her until Chelsie gave her information, supposedly proving that Leah was the bad one. She was going around lying. Lying is bad. You don't want that. And then that convinced McKenzie, that finally got McKenzie over the hump to go ahead and flip on her, put Leah on the block. Well, then Leah came back to her. They mended fences. They ironed things out. Oh, it was all a misunderstanding. And McKenzie didn't want her to leave anymore. But it was too late. The deed was done. It wasn't up to her anymore.
That goes back to not understanding how the game works. Is that at some point it's out of HOH's control.
Right.
Once you make the decision, it's not just you have the power for the entire week. And so one of the things you probably should realize, but it's one of I think from her side, she was thinking that Chelsie knows this game is steering me in a correct way. Like if I need to back out, I can back out. No, the deposit signed and checked. It's already sent over
Yes.
there. You already Zelled them. The bank's like, we can't get your money back. You sent it over there. It's in the cautionary part. When you send this money, it goes. Um, do you have any thoughts though of our other fellow house guests who lost?
Well, I mean, for Rubina, you could probably guess what my answer is going to be. Much like chemo, she was almost all emotion. I said chemo was 99%. I would give Rubina maybe 96 or 95 because there was a little bit more strategy to her than him. But she also landed herself in a showmance that could have easily ended her game instead of Tucker's. And then she was in the trio that was all about having each other as friends. So that's why I really can't go any lower than 96 or 95%.
I think that's a good number right there for her. I think unfortunately a lot of her game did follow by how she felt. Like you said, there was strategy involved when she needed to get herself off the block. But I think the issue is that since her game revolved so much around those emotions, that when it did come time to the end game, since she didn't really connect to Mackenzie already in such a way, like how you likened Chelsie and Mackenzie's relationship, there wasn't much positive form of that to make in strategy. And then Cam alone, I think the motions that control, he was excited for the dogs at the crib. That's every week. You want to give him a shout out. That was his goal.
Yeah, the one thing I will say for him that stands out, is that after the big Tucker Rubina kissing reveal, when they made a big show of it, he pulled aside McKenzie and Chelsie and he said, "I'm glad you guys aren't swayed by that emotional effing moment." And so I was both surprised and happy to see him thinking that way, like specifically thinking like we're not going to change our plans just because the two of them had a happy, have a happy romance going on. That may have
Yeah,
been his most strategic moment the whole game.
yeah, he had there. Who knows? Maybe without Chelsie there, Cam comes out as the mastermind of
Yeah.
everything. In another parallel world.
Yes, yes. Um, all right, we can go to the fifth rule, which says players need to pretend to be nice and play the social game. And Chelsie credited her social game several times during her final two Q&A and speech. But a lot of what she attributed to social game, I would call strategic game instead. And we've already been over that. And it's not just her. A lot of people just lump social game into everything.
Mhm.
But when you're planning, like who to align with and all that, that's the strategic game. Still, even so, she did have a great social game as well. She had to. After all, she started out in the worst position as a powerless microchip cheerleader in the first week, and she used her social game to get in good with HOH Angela. She continued in that way for most of the rest of the season, with the occasional glitch I mentioned earlier. Again, I consider a lot of that to be strategic in terms of getting on the good side of the right people, but she had to use her social abilities to make it happen. And of course, as she said, she positioned herself so she was with the people who wanted to take her to the end. In Mackenzie's case, especially, she said in interviews that it developed into a deep friendship where each was going to take the other. Now, of course, it's easier to be in that kind of friendship when you're on the side that's going to win. When you continue to make game moves like convincing Makensy she didn't need to prepare a speech and claiming you didn't have one ready when you'd actually been working on one for days already. So that's where the social and strategic kind of merge. It's like she was great friends with Makensy, but Mackenzie's going to look back and find out Chelsie was lying to her for days, setting her up for failure at the final two.
No, well said. I think that with Chelsea's game, because the way I see it is that the strategic portion of it is kind of putting the calculations together, and then your social game is the execution of it. And you need kind of a hand in hand both of those in some shape or form. We've seen some players be incredibly strategic and social a little less, or some people be so social and very less strategic. I mean, I think this season's kind of been a very polarized version. You're one or the other. One thing we saw with Chelsie, she was able to do both. I think, to her credit, right? Like, yes, you can be strategic and figure out
Mhm.
who you should align with. You have that outline with it, but her ability can really bring Makensy under her wing, have Cam be trusting her, have T-Core on the other side be like kind of her ally there, and
Mhm.
in initial weeks have Cedric right there with her too. I mean, and then lastly have Angela that initial week make sure not to
Right.
target her. I mean, she was able to maneuver herself in a really good way because she got along with people and always made so that there were other people around her who seemed a lot less light
Yes.
around, like as a shield there. So I think she was conscious of like her ability to connect with people, but I love that she didn't rely on it to get out of bad situations. She
Yes.
set herself up for success.
Yeah. Yeah. I do feel like, there are probably lots of examples we could go through here,
Yeah.
but there are only so many ways to say she did an excellent job here. So, we could move on to Makensy, who had a number of bumps in the road with her social game. She had problems with it early on after the Matt fiasco, and then, had some issues trying to make closer relationships. Part of it goes back to what we discussed in the first rule about that she didn't really know how to approach people. And for a while, she was actually a bit off-putting to some people, like Leah, who she'd eventually become good friends with her, but earlier on, Leah was complaining about the way Makensy would follow her and do whatever she was doing and mirroring her mannerism and stealing her jokes. Now, obviously, she got past it, but at one point, Leah actually talked about that as a reason she wanted to vote Makensy out.
Yeah, with Leah, she disliked half the people for no reason sometimes. So
That's
I
true.
don't
That's a
always
good point.
put
She would
her.
just say, "Oh, they give me the ick." Well, that
Yeah,
doesn't help,
exactly. So I try not to use Leah as the barometer of social game. I like for Mackenzie wise, it's kind of she had the opposite problem because she had no strategic stuff. Her social game and wasn't as high as her physical game the way she was winning competition, but was still there. She just didn't know where to execute. Where she was able to
Right.
kind of do certain measures, but when she pressed execute execution, she was already steered to the wrong area. Let's get Leah out. Let's get Angela out. Oh, let's use a veto right here. I mean, she, I think, was able to mesh herself into these groups because people found her likable. And as a whole, she didn't do too much to rub people the wrong way as the game continued on after we got a little past the pre-jury and even initial ends of it. So I can't give her too bad of a grade in this version because she was able to still connect with people. The issue is that she had no strategy behind the socializing.
Right. I mean, with that said, Makensy obviously did eventually find a home with Chelsie, but I wouldn't even credit that to her own social game. It was because of Chelsea's, along with a strong dose of Chelsea's strategic game to keep a grip on Makensy, like I said. Now, still, as I mentioned, it did become a friendship. And as it got near the end of the season, we often saw them griping to each other about other people like Cam, but not the other way around. I don't remember like seeing Chelsie gripe to Cam about McKenzie. So there is that.
Yeah.
Speaking of Cam, his social game was about his only game. Now, he seems to be a really, really nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the first few days, Quinn mentioned how cool Cam was and said, I love him. Every time he talks, I feel so good. And, of course, Cam or Quinn wasn't the only one feeling good about Cam, as some of the women did, like Leah early, and then a couple others who were flirting and cuddling with him. And, at one point, he turned on his social game even more because he found out that if Brooklyn had won the AI arena, he might have gone home. And he told Mike Bloom, I definitely switched up the social game for sure. I went more chill. I went way more for the non-threatening approach, using the social game and getting close to people.
Hey, I mean, he really amped up that non-threatening version of himself.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, not winning any competitions there. But no, I like I said in the beginning that if there's nothing else, I think Cam seems like a person you want to just hang out with out of his cast. He seems like a great guy, and I think the other people got that vibe too. Yes, like people got annoyed that he wasn't winning this competition, but I think it's impressive for him to actually get as far as he did without really like he would have been the ultimate no blood on my hands person to put on the block or something like that, because at that point the connections he had, no one was going to go out to bat for him. No one would be like, oh no, Cam is gone, my closest ally. Chelsie maybe, but like she would have been like, it's okay, I'll let it go. So yeah, he was able to maneuver himself into conversations. Everyone felt at ease with him, and that's the thing we talk about. Like, we're not here to evaluate lost potential, but if Cam literally tried to start making moves through it and start, because he was in the positions to, he was in those groups. If he just started taking the steering wheel just a little bit and say, hey, I need to figure this out. And he would have had a great story if he was started making moves behind the scenes where he's like, I didn't even need these competition wins to be able to get myself further in this game. So unfortunately, we just didn't see anything else though from there.
Yeah. Now, Rubina, of course, was great socially and everybody loved her. Some or one in a more literal sense. Indeed, it was her social game that made T-Core and Chemo flip against Cedric to keep her. It sure wasn't her strategic game that did it. Rubina was also the member of the trio who was most likely to talk to people outside of that trio. That gave her a bit more social standing and helped contribute to her being the last member of that group in the game.
Yeah, I mean, she maxed out her stats in the social game. She was really good at conversing with different people. My only regret is I wish she just did that to make connections outside of the trio.
Yes.
But that's kind of our biggest regret for each of these players, that they're actually such lovable people. They seem like T-Core, Chemo, and Rubina. And I hate lumping them all three in together, but when they only connected with all three of them, and when you look at why T-Core lost, why Chemo lost, and kind of what Rubina, is all the same reasons. It's because they did not leave this group of people. So if she did try doing that, I think we would have seen a lot more success for her down the line.
Yeah, and that leads us nicely to the sixth rule, which warns against being too much of a threat. So since we were just talking about Rubina's social game, let's continue with that here in this rule, because her likability was indeed threatening to the other three remaining. Not as threatening as T-Core or Chemo, which is the main reason she was there the longest, but still a worry. Could she have beaten Chelsie? Doubtful, but it probably wouldn't have been unanimous. Could she have beaten McKenzie? Quite possibly, if she could have put together some sort of coherent narrative about what she did in the game. It was too close to call. Plus, of course, Chelsie had been in McKenzie's ear about Rubina being more likely to take her out in final three, when in fact, it was Chelsie who was more worried that Rubina would take herself or Cam out.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was her threatening level where we could have
I guess let me
foreseen.
correct myself before someone corrects me in the comment. If Rubina had stayed, Cam would have already been taken out. So
Yeah,
it would have been herself. Yeah.
but if we go down the votes and figure things out, if you think about it, I mean, most likely, I mean, I think we have chemo vote for her no matter what she did. I think Tico would have voted for her. She still could have might have felt like, oh, maybe I give Chelsie the win just
Mm-hmm.
because of how her power, how overall she was really well played. And if Rubina wins that final HOH, I think that changes some things in some people's mind. I can see Angela staying bitter against Chelsie because she wants to give the vote to
Mm-hmm.
Rubina in a way. I mean, there's an argument to be made there. And with McKenzie, I would say it's almost a 50-50 at that point, too.
Yeah.
I could really see Rubina taking that one back home. Yeah, I mean, that was what was we talked about, like having that trio in there was such a mistake for all the players that they had to get them out one by one
Mm-hmm.
potentially. In Mackenzie's case, this was a great opportunity for her to finally win it because now, maybe Chelsie doesn't want to get out her versus, they really need to get Cam out last one because that puts Makensy in a great
Right.
position where she's kind of insulated.
Right. Right. Which is exactly why Chelsie was, wormed into Mackenzie's brain saying, no, you got to get rid of Rubina.
Hmm.
Now, moving back to Chelsie, by all rights, she should have been recognized as the biggest threat. She even said it herself. I quoted her talking about that to Mike Bloom earlier. And a few people did see it. I quoted one of Joseph's interviews back in Rule 1, identifying her as playing the best game. And he had the same opinion while in the House, too. Way back at the end of July, he said Chelsie is smart and the biggest threat in this game by far. Later, Quinn would say Chelsie was by far the most well-positioned player in the game. But even they weren't the only ones to see it. During, I think, Janky World, Leah told McKenzie that if either of them were up against Chelsie, they were screwed. McKenzie claimed to agree, but felt that targeting a so-called floater, who actually wasn't a floater, just someone on the other side, but targeting one of them was more important. And then at the end of the game, as the end of the game approached, she was talking to Rubina, who brought up what would happen if it was McKenzie and Chelsie at the end. And McKenzie was clearly right when she said Chelsie would win. And plus that Cam would take Chelsie to the end. Yet McKenzie steadfastly ignored this reality, which again goes to show how good a job Chelsie did in protecting herself and getting into her brain. First, she did a good job of hiding her threat level, even if some people noticed it. But then she got herself to a place where it didn't even matter. She could have been walking around with a sign that said biggest threat on it. And McKenzie would have been like, haha, that's a funny shirt.
Yeah, no, I mean, we see a pattern right here. Anybody who saw Chelsie as a threat, Chelsie clocked that and was like, "We need to get you out." I
Mm-hmm.
mean, systematically, she didn't allow a alliance of people to come against her because she was able to get each. She was pegging. It was like one of those games where you hammer down. Like those
Yeah.
arcade games, hit them
Yeah.
all down, and that's what she did. I mean, another, you don't when you're running from a bear, they always say you don't need to outrun the bear, you just need to outrun the other person next to you. And that's what she basically did. And Makensy in this scenario really just wasn't trying to get after her. She just wanted to grab anybody else,
Yes.
And she played that powerful. And that's the thing is like that's a combination of when you use all three of your social, your competition, your strategic like wellness all together, you're able to mitigate these issues of being such a huge threat because you have insulated yourself. I mean, again, that's why I think this game was really cool to see and blossom itself in the end game. Because I think a lot of players were watching like, oh, this is going to be kind of a boring end game with Chelsie or these other players because they haven't done this and that. No, we saw all her setup come all together, and we're like, whoa, these last 2 weeks were like,
Mm-hmm.
all her work has come together to show this beautiful win.
Yeah, like all those people who claimed, "Oh, Tucker's gone. I'm done watching it. Oh, Angela's gone. It's going to be boring." I mean, if any of those people actually did stop watching, then they missed a good game. Of course, if all you were watching for was Tucker's antics, well, then fine, whatever. But
They
um,
voted.
yes, yes, that is true. Now, as far as McKenzie, being a threat, Chelsie had to consider that possible threat level because many people would have been worried to move forward with someone who won as many comps as McKenzie had. But as Chelsie told Mike Bloom, I decided, let me keep her around because as long as she's here, she will be a bigger target than me. And as long as I develop a deep relationship with her, she will also take me. And she was obviously right on both counts. The funny thing is that while she was doing that, Chemo and Rubina were talking to each other about what a huge threat McKenzie was and how she had to go. And certainly Chelsie saw that because no way Chelsie could go to the end with her. Once again, we see that Chelsie had a much better understanding of the game than those two.
For me, it's almost impressive. I think McKenzie changed the game slightly with her final decisions, stuff like that. No longer can we just refer to players that have these wins and these huge targets as a shield, but in this case, a sword. Because McKenzie was never a shield for
Now, come on, there's only
Chelsie.
one
She
sword instead of a shield. That's Taylor. Come on, you know what?
she is the sword on her own right, but
Yes.
the way Chelsie wielded McKenzie, it was a sword because it was never coming back at her. At the one point, you have to ditch your shield and be like, all right, you need to go. All right. She did. She was able to keep her sword all the way through. And anybody who was thinking of getting Chelsie, McKenzie's like, nah, you're going out first. I got you. And, it's so tough to see because I think I would have felt better for McKenzie, honestly, if Chelsie at the end cut her. Because then I would have been like, all right, well, you did what, like, if you won that last competition, you could have won and took it out. But
Right.
knowing this is the reality of it hurts.
Yeah. Now, McKenzie herself had a different view of how to handle threats. She went on about how she was the opposite of Tucker because he wanted to take out the threats while she wanted to let the threats stay so they could all have a good game and be kumbaya. And she even said she didn't care if that got her ass booted. Well, even back when she said that, I wrote in my notes, well, that makes you a terrible player. And, she stuck to that idea. Here we are.
Yep, you stick to the idea, and that's what happens. I mean, this is the result right there. You get final two, and then some people, she was okay with that, and she says she's okay with that. So it's we'll see what time tells.
Yeah, it's her bank account, not mine.
Still 75K richer, but
yeah, just not 750K richer.
That would be nice.
Yeah. Now, as for Cam, he looked like a threat a couple of times. First, early on, because, like you said earlier, looking at him, he appeared to be the kind of guy who could win comps. Looks can be deceiving. Don't judge a book by its cover. He started to become a social threat as well, but both of those faded, and he became, in the words of Leah, the least threatening person, which I'm sure was fine by him because that was part of his goal that he mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I mean, he wanted to ensure that was his strategy. He was worried that he would come off as too much of a threat. The issue was, I think he should have become more of a threat in the game. I think that hindered him so much that he kind of played that other way. And I think you kind of said it, you likened it when it was the Brooklyn, if she won the AI competition, he could have been a potential, person to go home. That worried him, and he wanted to change his game to play a much more like calm, lay low game. And I think he did that too much. At some point, there's a reason why you're a threat, right? You're a threat because everyone who's going to win the game or should win the game should be a threat. It's just how you mask it.
Right.
The issue was he did not become a threat anymore, and that means you have no winner equity.
I mean, when your comic book is literally you fading into the background.
Yeah.
All right, we could go to the seventh rule, which says to trust almost nobody. I feel like in the future, people might look back and wonder how Chelsie could have possibly trusted McKenzie and Cam to take her to the end. But the thing is, she didn't just trust them. She worked on them until she knew what they would do. This wasn't a situation where someone just said something and another person believed it. It was the result of a lot of hard work on Chelsea's part.
Yeah, I mean, you have to work hard to miss people that much. And I guess maybe we can, I mean, it's a strategy, it's social, but maybe this is the part where we can say it is the mist. of
Mhm.
how you make people trust you, but you don't trust them so much. I mean, I don't feel like Chelsie ever put her game life in anybody else's hand. And I think that's the most we can ask for in this
Right.
type of role, where you don't let in yourself be threatened or put yourself in a form of risk really because you trusted somebody too much. And we didn't really see that too much from her. I mean, of course, there's that one week where they got duped a little bit with the Cedric stuff like that, but she was able to kind of maneuver her way there. And the good thing is she didn't trust Cedric so much that he was able to throw her under the bus in a way.
Mhm.
So I mean, overall, I really can't see, she really let people connect on her with a personal level, but game wise, she gave them as much information as they needed without
Yeah.
divulging too much.
Yeah. Now, as a counter example, I just mentioned one person saying something and the other just believing it. Well, we can look at McKenzie. As I mentioned earlier, we saw her admitting to her own naivete more than once. And yet she still somehow insisted at the end that nobody could influence her and she made decisions for herself. But that's what Chelsie and to an extent Cam did. They completely influenced her. Like I said, Chelsie was in her brain. The fact that she didn't recognize it made it even that much better. Like you have been brainwashed and you do not even realize that the brainwasher is sitting right next to you.
That's the hardest thing about the show, I think, after the fact for the cast members is that looking back and
Mhm.
realizing, wow, like, because you feel the reason why you make the decisions in games because you have this relationship with this player, especially in her case that she wants to bring forward. She's
Right.
trusting him. And now you have to basically look back and say, man, in the last 90 days, like a lot of our relationship is built on certain forms of lies and this and that. Like your goal was basically to manipulate me to get this win. Again, nothing wrong with that. That's part of the game, right?
Right.
But for the player on the other end, that's a really difficult pill to swallow. So, we can beat on a horse, a dying horse, but like at this point, we know what she did.
Yeah.
Basically, kind of ruined the game for her. There, I just only hope that she can kind of at least realize, like, okay, this wasn't the best decision for me game wise, but also be able to accept the reality of it and then move on from it, take whatever positives she can, because I just wouldn't want to be in her shoes right now,
Yeah.
especially after everyone basically probably imagine the whole internet telling her like, "What did you
I
do?"
hope she stays away from the internet. Quite
Yeah,
honestly, I hope she stays away from the internet, stays away from this podcast, stays away from all podcasts. Like
yeah. There's
she
no
needs
good
some time
coming
to
there.
absorb what happened here.
Exactly.
Yeah. And but saying that we still, our job is to be honest. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
that's but all right, we could go to Appendix A, which is about the jury phase of the game. And I think today we'll just focus on the final two here, starting with how they handled Q&A and their final speech. Speaking of being brutally honest. We had heard through much of the season that Chelsie was a master speaker, and she certainly showed it. And I just want to read back some of what she said in her best response, which was to Cam's question. She said, I did not have to survive the block. I did not have to win competitions to get here. My social game was strong enough to get me to the end. Could I have won? Yes, I proved that in the endurance comp when I beat two D1 athletes. If you look at my game, it is not one sided, it's a diamond. If you look at it from
Mm.
multiple perspectives, you can see that it is beautiful. This, and then follow up in her final words, drove home all the important points about her game. If anyone was still on the fence, this pushed them fully onto her side. She had been going through it for days, all while telling McKenzie, oh, I have no idea what I'm going to say. And, I'm just going to wing it. And you should too.
Yeah, no, I mean it was a beautifully crafted final speech she did there. Her answer was good. I was a little worried, I'll be honest though, in the beginning initial portion when she had answered Angela's question first. I thought she didn't, because typically when you answer one of your jury members' questions or in any form of these types of shows, you want to give a little back to them. You want to make them feel validated for the question they're asking or any of their feelings for it. I didn't think she really like did that with Angela initially, where she was like, if you're sad, you can be sad. She didn't say it like that, but she
Mm-hmm.
stuck by her gun. She
Right.
didn't back down, which again, I appreciate that. But I also was worried that might cost her the vote there. But then she stayed on that. She basically reiterated that, like, this is my game. I believe the way I played it was great and the best game between us two, and I deserve to win because of that, and you should understand. And that was kind of what she reinforced. I actually really love that. I love people standing behind their games, and overall, it was a great performance against anybody. But I also think it was helped probably in due because of the polar opposite answers we got from McKenzie in the story.
Yeah, I mean, McKenzie basically did wing it. You know,
Yeah.
she said the words that Chelsie had told her, that her game spoke for itself, and it did, just not in the way she thought. It spoke for herself because all she had was comps, and even when she won those comps, she wasn't the one actually making decisions, and the jurors figured it out. Even before hearing it from Chelsea's mouth, they discussed at the round table how they thought Chelsie was doing, well, exactly what she was doing. And they just wanted confirmation, which they got. And they also got confirmation that McKenzie was the puppet.
Yeah, it was tough because I don't know if it was one of those things where it's like it felt like the defense was already set up by that, like the prosecution right there. I mean, when she answered her one move, she really made strategically was the Leah move, and then right after it, completely discounted by Chelsie. Like she hook, line, and sinker, and that. Like I think I watched it over again earlier today. I saw Mackenzie's face just kind of drop when she realized basically like my one answer, my switch was actually now just influenced or was being told to be
Yes.
influenced by Chelsie. And keep in mind, you can't fact check on here and everything like that. You don't
Yeah.
know, it was the truth, but Chelsie was able to craft it regardless one or the other, being like, hey, this is my plan. She just sold you what she thought was her plan that was actually my plan. Did not help at all.
No. And yeah, that was just, yeah. I mean, it was, I don't even know how to describe it. You know, I made that obviously one of my TikToks on that, and yeah, it was just so perfectly set up. You know, that McKenzie just fell right into that trap. To use that as her best example, like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
But you know, as far as dealing with the jury overall, it seems both of them had some misreads. The difference was for Chelsie, they were misreads in a positive direction. Like she thought Quinn would vote for the person who had the most comp wins, as she said in interviews. And that blew my mind because he, of all people, was going to vote for the person who played the best game of Big Brother. So that was a pretty bad misread, especially since Quinn had told her while he was in the game that if he got sniped, he would lift up her game in the jury, and he did.
Yeah.
But you know, it was somewhat understandable that she might think Leah and Angela would vote for McKenzie to win. You know, and I have to say, Angela's vote for Chelsie surprised me the most, especially after we saw her antics in the roundtable, which, by the way, Taylor did a great job of shutting her down. And, you know, but then we also saw Angela making some faces while Chelsie was talking in the final two. Now, someone commented about her vote on one of my TikToks. And usually when I say, oh, I got this comment on a TikTok, it's some ridiculous thing and I'm just making fun of it. But this one actually raised an interesting point. Could Angela have been pissed off when she found out McKenzie didn't want to veto her and didn't even like her, but Chelsie was the one who convinced her to do it? So this was a point against McKenzie and a point for Chelsie at the same time. And, you know, so emotionally speaking, I think that could have gotten Angela to be like, well, why would I want to vote for McKenzie now? And plus, we know how much Angela complained about being on the wrong side of a vote when she was in the game. So maybe she realized which way it was going and didn't want to be on the wrong side here either. She didn't want to be doing interviews and explaining on social media why she voted, you know, the way that the majority didn't.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that McKenzie might have had a chance. Probably not actually, but she would have had a fighting chance if she was able to craft some really good answers here and talk about why she does deserve to win. Here's the thing: is like you're saying, my game speaks for itself. Yes, but now you have to speak for it. You need to advocate for your game. That why does your 11? Because here's the thing: is yes, we have kind of grilled into McKenzie in so many different forms of it. But I don't want to look at that. She had incredible competition wins. She was placed in good positions that she was able to maneuver, whether we say it was because of Chelsie, that's what we're saying here. But in those moments, she has her argument she can give to this jury, and if she was able to craft it here. When you fumble Angela, when you've given her veto after veto, saved her butt here. Leah, yes, you voted her out, but you could have made it that she's such a huge threat. I need to do this, Leah. I love you. I want to, there. Maybe you can kind of bring Quinn on the side from there because of that connection there. I still feel like there was something there. There's a way to maneuver yourself into this, and she just didn't give herself a shot. I mean, she was completely outclassed at every point of it, and I think we said endgame. She had no idea what she was walking in herself into when she went into these jury questioning.
Exactly, because she got all her advice from her opponent. We talked about that earlier. I mean, we saw and heard McKenzie, and she told Mike Bloom she was not afraid to sit next to the best people and go head to head. And again, her game plan was not to get out huge competitors, but rather, quote, my game plan was to play Big Brother. And that's exactly what I did. No, you didn't. Or if you did, it was poorly, because she has no idea of what it actually means to play Big Brother. She played Big Brother reindeer games. She played comps, and she thought that's what it was to play Big Brother. But it's not, especially when you get to the end game. She further told Mike Bloom she knew her chances to win would have been much better against Cam. And she even said she carried him along because she knew she could beat him in the end. Yet when she got to the end, she didn't do it. She added to Mike. But again, my game plan wasn't to have an easy win and wasn't to play a game that I didn't want. Yeah, winning $750,000 was clearly not a game anyone would want to play. Who would want that?
Yeah, it's tough, especially when she says that, because if that's her strategy, she didn't carry Cam over to win. She carried Cam basically to give another vote to Chelsie.
Yes.
I mean, you put she made it so that she would have all the blood on her hand, and at the end still cut him. That's what's frustrating to me, that she had these incredible wins and abilities to enact change. She could have enacted change in the Big Brother house to make sure that she was in these positions here. Even if she doesn't know the game, having these wins right here in the way she could be like, all right, at this point, like, it doesn't take a scientist to say 2 + 2 is 4. I need to do this. I need to take Cam out here. I need to take out Chelsie. This is my moves right here, and this is what I did. And like, now put me and him next to each other. Tell me who should win. Like, yeah, so I mean, overall, the jury management was completely mishandled. But I mean, one person understood what jury management meant, and one person did not know that existed to be a part of the game.
Right.
So, yes, you want to stand next to the best of the best, but you don't understand what you're being judged upon. That's the issue here.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Okay, I want to be judged against the best. Well, the best what exactly?
Yeah.
So. All right. Well, I had mentioned that when we were getting to the end of the rules, I was going to talk about our regular segment. Julie Chen Moonves is wrong about blank, and so we'll close out our season with this one because it's appropriate here. I had, Dalton Ross had asked Julie about McKenzie's decision to take Chelsie instead of Cam, just what we were talking about. And Julie said she seemed prepared to possibly lose the game in order to stay true to who she is as a person and keep her integrity intact. I'm proud of her. Now, of course, after everything we just discussed, this makes me want to scream, no! There is literally nothing to be proud of in her decision. It was horrible. She gave away a huge chunk of money. And yet I don't want to say excuse, we can understand that she did not know the game. We'll still criticize her for it. This is the host of all 26 seasons saying it's great for someone to choose to lose.
Chenbot right there. It's the AI, Ainsley has taken over completely. I don't know. I just don't know how you can. Most of the times I'll let you take this segment on and just let you do your thing on here. But it is so sad to see the main game host over here just advocate for people not to play the hardest game here.
Yeah.
Like, play as hard as you want. Get on Big Brother. That's, I think that's what separates, unfortunately, Big Brother from other shows at points, is where I wish we had people advocating for you to play at cut. Like we talk about the greats, the Dr. Wills, all those people. What if we want those players? We want the next generations to be on here to play like that. The show itself needs to advocate for that.
Yeah, but no, she's proud of her for losing.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, it is about time to wrap things up. So, what are your final thoughts about Chelsie, McKenzie, Cam, and Rubina?
Wow. What a season. I really actually thoroughly enjoyed this entire season of Big Brother 26. And I don't think that's a hot take. I think this is a wonderful season from start to finish with a lot of different ups and downs here. But what makes it even great and what I do love about it is our winner, Chelsie. I mean, she played an overall incredible game from her socials, from her strategic to her wins in competition. I mean, we saw an overall player win the game this season. And I love seeing that. And I think I didn't know who was going to win this season from the middle ground here. Even at the end, yes, it was hers to lose, but also the way she got there was kind of impressive of how she maneuvered it here. From the people who lost there, Cam, again, I think I would love to hang out with him. It would be fun. In the game context, there wasn't much of a change in there. Rubina had a really good potential to play this game even further if she kind of got out of that trio or worked her relationships out of that. And I kind of sent her home. And I think the biggest loss of the season, what I hurt the most is seeing McKenzie, because I think this was one of the biggest giveaways right there. This was a fumble at the 1 yard line. No, this wasn't even a fumble at a yard. It was inches right there, She had to just kind of go in there. And I think we would have a very different episode because we would have to figure out, all right, well, she broke a lot of these rules, but she won this. So I guess for our sake, I'm very happy that the rules have triumphed here. Overall, though, really fun to see him play. Chelsie deserved to win it. Anybody who else says anything else doesn't understand Big Brother.
Right. For our sake and for the future game's sake, because I think future players will watch this. So, yes, I very much enjoyed the season too. I think, anyone listening to us over this time should know that. The game came down to a battle between the super fan and the non-fan. The woman with a plan versus the woman without a clue how to even approach a plan. Didn't even know a plan was needed. And the jury made the right decision. I have seen a few people whining on social media that McKenzie was robbed or other such nonsense. The people writing it need to seriously step back and realize that Chelsie won unanimously. And there were many, many good reasons for it, as we've gone over. McKenzie talked about playing the game with pure honesty and loyalty and all those great things that have little to no bearing on the game of Big Brother. I talked in the first rule about Chelsea's camera chat in which she said, this is not church, this is the game. So don't come into Big Brother and say you want to keep your morals intact. This ain't Uno, this ain't Monopoly, this ain't Twister, this is Big Brother, play the game. And obviously we can see how Chelsie did that all the way until the end, while McKenzie truly had no idea she was even supposed to do it. Watching McKenzie try to play took me back to the very early days of reality TV, where some people truly just didn't understand how the game was different from real life. Nowadays, nobody has any excuse for not realizing that. Any ignorance is their own fault. And I've said this before. We can say, well, they weren't a fan. They were recruited. I don't care. Find out. When I had a job interview back in the day for a position that maybe I wasn't the best suited for, maybe I didn't know that much about, I did research to find out more about it. I didn't just come in and say, well, you should give me the job, even though I don't really know what it's about. Similarly, no one's going to give someone the win, even though they don't know what Big Brother's about. Chelsie simply dominated McKenzie and the game itself. She said the greatest power I had in this game was my words. And she used that power to her advantage. She got people to do what she wanted them to do. She wanted McKenzie in Final 3 with her, so she planned for it and she made it happen. It didn't matter that McKenzie won comps because Chelsie was the one who controlled her. Indeed, this led to the final battle that essentially boiled down to McKenzie saying, I won lots of comps, and Chelsie retorting, I positioned myself so I didn't need to win comps, and yet I still did. I should also mention Cam and Rubina here, but I really think I've said almost everything I can about them. Neither of them really played the game. Cam at least said his move to become quieter was done on purpose, but that doesn't really mean it was a good idea. Rubina just carried on the tradition of T-Core and Chemo. They became extras in this TV show. Though Cam at least had a chance if, he could have actually won a comp or McKenzie had gotten a clue of how to play. But those had about equal chances of happening, almost zero. I don't think a writer could have scripted the ending to the season any better. With McKenzie claiming she made her own moves and then using the example of Leah when she most certainly did not make her own move in that situation. She said earlier in the game that she was, quote, naive to a fault, but she wanted to come to Big Brother and show she could make her own decisions. Well, she made her own decisions, and they were the wrong ones. McKenzie told Mike Bloom, for me, her winning was me winning, but it wasn't. There is only one winner, and she earned it by playing by far the best game this season and one of probably the top 5 or so games of any winner in Big Brother. And that is why Chelsie won and McKenzie, Cam, and Rubina lost.
Well said, David.
Thank
well
you.
said.
My power is my words.
Your gift of gab. You do have the gift of gab. And while the season of Big Brother is over, our talking about reality TV and all these different shows are not, because we are active on so many different social media platforms. So please check us out. We can be found on Twitter for me at the Ovi Kabir, on Instagram at Ovi Kabir, and on TikTok I'm at Basmati Boy. But David is truly all over the place, and with Survivor still being on here, you need to make sure you check him out. But you can find all his various accounts through his Linktree at Linktree/David Bloomberg, and you can find him on Twitter and Blue Sky at David Bloomberg, and on Threads, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and all video platforms you can find him at David Bloomberg TV.
Yeah, I mean, just today, shortly before we recorded, I got to over 40,000 subscribers on YouTube. So I have been posting 3 or even more videos per day at that site, along with TikTok and Instagram. Of course, they're mostly about Big Brother and Survivor 47. I still have a few more on Big Brother. Of course, lots more on Survivor, plus other shows like The Summit and House of Villains and The Anonymous. Also, I am, of course, continuing to podcast about Survivor as I talk about why blank lost each week with Jessica Lewis. In addition, I'm co-hosting the Tradar podcast, coverage of the Traders Canada Season 2. So, there you can still find me, like you said, in many different places, many different ways.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And as we wrap up, I want to encourage people to check out our RHAP Patreon program at robhasawebsite.com/patron. Rob has several patron-only podcasts for Big Brother, plus other perks like the Facebook group and Discord. You can help support shows like ours and everything on the network by becoming a patron at robhasawebsite.com/patron.
And yes, make sure you're subscribed to all of the RHAP podcasts by going to our YX Lost feed page or directly on the newly rebranded RHAP We Know Reality TV podcasts by going to weknowrealitytv.com and selecting your podcast service of choice. You'll not only find content like us and, once Big Brother restarts again, things like the daily live feed updates, but, in a more timely situation, also Survivor and many other shows. You can get all of those by going to weknowrealitytv.com as well.
And finally, for the last time this season, but not for the future, we want to thank Scott St. Pierre, Jessica Sterling, the whole RJP and reality TV wrap-ups behind the scenes team for all the work they do, editing and posting and everything else. We really appreciate everything you do to get our voices from our microphones to your ears. And David, thank you so much for being a wonderful co-host. You've been wonderful this entire thing. I love our back and forth takes. Like, we could never do this without you. And you guys can catch a lot more of David because he's not stopping anytime soon. And then finally, I got to thank the viewers and listeners here. This has been a great season, a marathon. Thanks for checking in with us week in and week out, from commentating, from letting us know your hot and cold takes, because some of them are super cold and we disagree completely with them. But we appreciate you giving the time to just comment away. Let us know what you think about this Final Four, the winner here, your thoughts, and overall, what did you think about us this entire season? We'd love to hear about it. So just let us know.
Yes, and thank you, of course, Ovi, for another fun season. It really is great to be able to talk to you each week, and of course, texting back and forth. As things are happening. I will miss that. As we move on, but feel free to text me your Survivor takes. And
Of
It,
course.
in the meantime, look forward to next season, and um, and yeah, it's just been great, and I appreciate you. I appreciate the listeners and viewers, and like I said, hopefully we will continue this on, for as long as Big Brother goes.
That's the goal. That's the goal. We'll see
So
y'all next year then.
that's right. See everybody soon. If you're only a Big Brother viewer, maybe not so soon, but if you're Big Brother, Survivor, other shows, I'll be on those as well. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.